Hello, and welcome to the Health Data Ethics Podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Owens, and I'm here with my friend and collaborator, Brandon Reese. Brandon, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Jenny. My name is Brandon Reese. I'm a business relationship manager with Purdue University. I've been in that role about 5 years, and I have the opportunity to interact with Jenny at our ongoing annual BRM Connect conference.
Absolutely. And thank you for coming back on the podcast to talk about your talk that you gave at BRM Connect in October of 2024. I didn't get to hear it. I was really bummed about it. So thank you for letting me pressure you into basically delivering the same talk just for me personally, an audience of one, and now an audience of all of our listeners. So thank you.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
I wanted to pick back up where you were talking about listening. So you had you actually laid a thread for this in our previous episode, and I wanted to pick back up on it. You talked about spending time listening to yourself and scheduling time to meet with yourself. Talk to me about what that looks like for you.
Yeah. So I preface this in the talk with a little audience participation. I asked people to raise their hands if they'd ever had a one-on-one meeting. Right. And most people kind of looked at each other and like, well, of course I've had a one-on-one meeting. And I said, well, what do you talk about? You talk about your goals, where you're spending your time, any initiatives that are coming up, where you're running into problems, whatever that might be with a manager or a two-up manager, something like that, or your own team. And then I asked who does this with themselves. And I splashed up a meeting, like a meeting invite that was Brandon to Brandon 1-to-1 from 9 to 10 on a Friday, like just to get a laugh, really, but to acknowledge that I really do this. It may not look like that in my calendar, but if you're not paying attention to yourself, it is really difficult to do this role effectively when you need to do it with other partners. And so what I will do there, in terms of listening to yourself, is answer those questions. Where am I spending my time? Is it moving the needle? I know we talked about in the last episode, anything I can do to kind of move that needle forward, whether that be shorten time to discovery or reduce duplication of effort, things like that. Is what I'm doing this week, this month, this quarter, am I still checking all those boxes that are the reason that I do this role? And I would encourage people to do this on whatever frequency makes sense for them. I do it weekly just because I need shorter, smaller bites for organization in my brain. But people I know that do this quarterly, and they basically consider it a goal setting session and walk away from it with something actionable. Be intentional about it. Don't just block the calendar and then review email or whatever else pops up. But yeah, that's how I meet with myself on that.
I love that idea. I've tried to be more intentional about setting time aside to do actual focused work, because under normal circumstances, I end up in meetings all day, and then all of my focused work happens in the evenings after my children are in bed, which is a terrible example to set for myself and for others. But I think having that time set aside to really review with yourself and to say, okay, like here's what's on my plate. Yeah, I view it almost like as a managerial conversation, right? Like, okay, here's what's on my plate. What are my priorities? What balls am I dropping? And are those the balls I'm okay with dropping?
That last thing is really important. In the talk, I talk about 168 hours. That's the total number of hours you get in a week. What you do with it is necessarily taking from something else, like it's opportunity cost. So if you choose to do this thing, you're effectively saying no to everything else you could be doing in your life, work or otherwise, with that time. So the point you made there about which balls are you dropping and are you okay with that is really critical. It is easy to get operationally bogged down, especially if you came into this role from an operational type background. One of the nicest things about my role here at Purdue is that I don't have any operational responsibilities. So I'm able to take time to do that meet with yourself, to do that independent research, to do whatever it is that's moving that needle forward, both for the college, the mission, and myself. Mm-hmm. Not everyone has that luxury, but you could listen to endless talks from experts far more experienced than I about role clarity as it relates to BRM, and I would encourage you to do so. Yeah. Articulating that you need that time, maybe to your boss, but maybe even to yourself, is something that can really help you get it and use it with intent.
Yeah, I tend, and I know that this is terrible, right? But I tend to be it's okay, I'll just work harder person. And that works just fine up until the point where it really doesn't.
Yeah.
Great content in the listening section. But one of the things that I wanted to really pull out was you had a section on listening actively and on watching people's body language. And I want to talk about that both in-person meetings and then just like we're doing now on a virtual. Like how do you listen really intently to somebody when you're in a virtual call, especially what if it's not a cameras on culture? Then what do you do?
Yeah. As I mentioned in the first episode we did, I started this role and then the pandemic hit about 5 weeks later. So I effectively learned all of this from what was my kitchen, then my dining room table, then a guest room, and then wherever else my wife moved me around the house. Active listening is really critical. And you may have heard the like 7%, 38%, 55%. These are the percentages assigned to meaning conveyed when someone's speaking, whereas 7% of the meaning is the words that they say, only 7. 38% is how you say them, the cadence, the intonation. Like if I were to give this talk and just kind of talk like this and yes, Jenny, it's good to see you, like that kind of thing, it doesn't convey the same impact. But 55% is the body language. So the same thing applies when you're listening, and you can observe how people are speaking to you or reacting to what you have said. And maybe you have a speaking partner and you're going back and forth. One of the things that I really struggle with when coming into the BRM space, because of how much listening I'm doing as opposed to my previous roles where I was operational, is I have a tendency to finish other people's sentences. Sometimes up here in my head, but a lot of times out of my mouth. And it's been an ongoing lifelong battle. Like bosses, friends, my own spouse, my parents have all told me like, hey, let me finish. And it's not that I don't think you're smart enough or fast enough or your idea is good. For whatever reason, my brain, if you give me a pause, is trying to finish that sentence 4 or 5 different ways. And sometimes it comes out. And that can be one thing that you work on when you are actively listening to someone, is to just focus on what they're saying rather than trying to finish thoughts yourself. But when they're talking, like body position matters. So if someone's like crossing their arms and leaning back and, I've got a monitor over here. And if I'm talking to you and I'm looking to the left and you see the side of my head, that can mean maybe that I'm not really paying attention to what's going on in the meeting. But maybe my setup, at least in a virtual space, is required that like you're actually over here. And for whatever reason, my camera is right here. It happens that way sometimes. What I've found here is leading by example helps. You mentioned I coached a team where not only did the BRM's business partner not turn their camera on, they didn't do meetings. Like they only got Teams messages and emails. That was the entirety of it. That's a lot harder. There's university research on how to engage with text only conversations in a meaningful way. And that's a longer, different topic. But if you find yourself in a space where you are in a virtual meeting and the person doesn't have the camera on or is not engaging in a way that you are picking up, feels like they're engaging with what you're saying, then you can lead by example. I start meetings early if I own them, just to let people show up and have that like water cooler talk, which doesn't exist in a virtual environment, but it can be. I turn my camera on and I will generally leave it on for the entirety of the seminar, the meeting, no matter how many people are in it. And it tends to bring a few people out. And one thing you can do is say, hey, I just want to make sure that everybody's mic and camera's working. Right? I'm not calling anybody out. I'll never call anybody out, but I might call on someone and say, hey, Jenny, what do you think about this? And if I'm looking at you and talking, you might be more willing to flip yours on. And if you do, I can now watch your nonverbal cues. I can see if you're nodding. I can see there's books and TED Talks and all kinds of things on body language and listening. But it is one of the things that you can deal with virtually a little bit easier because everyone's sort of glued to the little space in front of them. And it's easier to tell when they're not engaged. In person, if you're in a meeting room, whatever it might be, one of the things that I have used to help facilitate honest conversation is to remove all the distractions. So when I'm meeting with a new business partner, faculty member for the first time, I don't take a laptop, which is weird for IT. I take an actual pen and paper. If for whatever reason I'm in a meeting and I have my laptop, I have chosen a tablet laptop with a pen that I can fold flat and it lays down. So this is an interesting phenomenon that I've noticed. Yeah, exactly. That if you have a laptop and the screen sticks up, and let's say it sticks up like 8 inches, it only sticks up like 8 inches, right? Exactly. You've created a virtual barrier between you and whoever you're having a conversation with. And that is distracting not only for you, because like I look at my taskbar and there's all kinds of things that are potentially blinking at me. I may be taking the best notes ever and I'm laser focused on what you're saying, but that meeting notification pop up or that dentist appointment pop up, whatever it is, like it's there and it's distracting. So I'm not 100% plugged in. For the listener or whoever's on the other side of the laptop, all they see is that like Apple or Dell logo. but they know what that thing can do. And so they're always wondering, are they actually paying attention to what I'm saying? Because they're looking at their laptop, and especially when a relationship is new, they may not know that you're doing whatever it is that you're really good at, taking great notes, whatever it might be. And what you're doing may be very germane to the conversation, but it is one of those that if you can minimize that distraction, it really helps solidify that connection.
This is amazing advice. I could listen to you talk about listening for hours, but I think I'm going to trim this portion of our interview here. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and for sharing your expertise. If people want to reach you, is there do you have a non-Purdue oriented website?
Yeah. I have my LinkedIn profile. Mm-hmm. I have, I'm with an organization called the Wildwood Institute that does leadership coaching training as well. That website can be found there. It is currently in production, but, you can reach me at brandon.c.reese@gmail.com if you'd like as well. And I'm happy to discuss this or anything else BRM related. Thank you for asking.
Thank you so much for your time, Brandon. I really appreciate it.